All that we do at businessofcannabis.com. Coming up on BFC Live, we connect with Barbara Pastori. She is the Director of Strategy and Data for Prohibition Partners. Last week, she wrote a piece called Is Cannabis the Future for Big Tobacco? We wanted to connect with her about that piece. This is Barbara Pastori from Prohibition Partners. Barbara, thank you so much for being here.
Hi there. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, I'm glad we could, because last week we read, and then we pushed out through the Business of Cannabis, something you wrote on Prohibition Partners called Is Cannabis the Future for Big Tobacco? And I think folks here, but folks around the world see big tobacco and cannabis next to each other, and they sometimes get nervous. Talk a little bit about sort of the thinking that went into your piece and some of the key findings.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so basically, I mean, I guess like the article was prompted by some big declarations by the CEO Philip Morris, like declaring that, you know, the UK should stop selling cigarettes altogether, etc. And there's been a number of announcements over the past years, actually, about big tobacco taking an interest in cannabis. And so it's, I guess the thinking was really like understanding, trying to take some time to think what sort of interaction and if tobacco could be good for cannabis. And my take is that it could be a good marriage, actually, because tobacco bring in a lot of skill set that is important for the cannabis industry. You know, it's companies with a lot of cash that are trying to change the course of action, you know, the development, because their industry is declining, and they have a ton of experience in dealing with heavily regulated market, had to endure, you know, marketing restrictions. So that's something, you know, obviously cannabis experiences as well. And have other points, really, like technology, for example, like, and the fact that we've been looking at vaping, etc., that can be useful for cannabis. And so the idea was really like going through like a number of these points and see what's the balance, is if it's a positive one or not. And I think it is overall
For both sides.
I think so. Now, obviously, like there's a reputational aspect on both sides. You know, cannabis is challenging, tobacco is challenging. Cannabis is associated with health nowadays. But it's had like a lot of social stigma, and it's had over time. But you know, tobacco is developed at the beginning, you know, with big iconic kind of like lifestyle brands that then that kind of let go of that side of our marketing, and associating with cannabis can be positive, even for aspects like sustainability, because I mean, cannabis is not just indoors grown, can be outdoors, and is you know, sustainability is something that it's in the conversation. Hemp is carbon negative, so tobacco getting involved in cannabis can have actually benefit, you know, from like marketing, getting closer to even younger people that are like sort of like smoking less than they used to in terms of previous generations, and also, you know, getting closer to something that's more lifestyle and improving their overall like economic situation, like their investment in that way. And then cannabis, as I said, you know, tobacco's been lobbying for decades and decades, so they do have a lot of power, like in terms of you know, getting their agenda pushed through. And of course, if those kind of resources were to go for cannabis, like it could be a really good could have a really good impact on the industry, I think. And
there's the other, I mean, there's sort of some key pillars that I pulled from yours that really resonate sort of with a full-blown market like here in Canada, or what's happening in the US, but also thinking this globally is like, you know, huge industries like tobacco and beverages and alcohol, for that, like they really have their supply chain dialed in, right? Cannabis is still like really early days on a supply chain, and those supply chains are really regional or countrywide. Like that's one. Money, obviously, like they certainly have lots of money, they have experience. Yes, but also they've done all of those things in this super heavily regulated industry that, you know, I think many regulators are looking at cannabis in the tobacco mold more than they are sort of bev alcohol mode. And so it really is this, like, there are some parallel things, and in many respects, I think tobacco's been there and been there longer and been there more successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, the parallelism of a supply chain, I mean, there are industries that deal with a plant. And that's, it's industry that deal with a plant, end up in consumer service, the agricultural side. There are the logistics, like in many words, there are things that are parallel. And as you said, like tobacco had a chance to optimize this kind of things over time. So we're experts there. And also, like just getting to hand consumer, like the fact that, for example, the dispensary model, and tobacco is sold in many countries in specialized shops, tobacconists or licensed places. So I think that the model of a supply chain is just the skills tobacco has is kind of transferable. And on the flip side, for tobacco, it does make sense to enter in this industry. Although, I mean, I think it's important to notice that tobacco companies are not just looking at, let's say, cannabis 1.0, but also 2.0, no? So we're looking at diversifying their product ranges. And cannabis obviously is kind of like, it's a segue because it starts from the plant. It has, maybe an element that is smokables, and vaping, etc., which is more like a natural, it's something that's already part of the tobacco industry, but it allows tobacco to also go into other product formats that are less hazardous for health, for example. So I think in that way, it's very interesting to see how this company take an interest.
Yeah, and as you sort of kicked it off with sort of major tobacco executives basically saying we're getting out of the tobacco game, right? Like there has to be somewhere to go. Companies that size and age don't just fold up their tent and go home and everybody finds another job. They find where to allocate those resources. They try to predict where the world is going. And I think your piece did a really good job sort of outlining why sort of cannabis might be a place to do some of those things.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
we'll link to the piece so people can read it for themselves. But Barbara, as always, your thoughts on the sector, your thoughts on this are super valuable, and we like to push them out to our audience. So thank you for your time to talk about it, and we'll continue to sort of link to this as this goes out as well.
Thank you so much, Jay.
Thanks,
Anytime. Pleasure.
That was Barbara Pastori, the Director of Strategy and Data for Prohibition Partners. If you like this program, please rate and review us wherever you heard the show. It helps support the work we do. We're able to do what we do because of our ongoing partners, including Alterna Savings, Cannabis at Work, Cannabis Benchmarks, Can Delta, Gallagher, Headset, and Torque Mains. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com.